Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. North Korea is recalibrating its posture on all fronts. Kim Yo-jong, the sister of leader Kim Jong-un, has flatly rejected dialogue with the Lee Jae Myung government and declared Pyongyang's nuclear status irreversible, drawing a clear line against both Seoul's and denuclearization talks. But the message doesn't stop there, as direct flights to Moscow begin and millions of artillery shells flow to Russia. North Korea's alignment with the Kremlin is no longer symbolic, it's operational. Still, China remains its primary trade partner, signaling a careful balancing act. Now, in response, Seoul is hinting at flexibility on U.S. joint exercises while investing in missile defense, and President Trump says is still open to talks. With the peninsula in flux, the bigger question is, what kind of long-term game is Pyongyang playing now? For a deeper discussion on this, we're connecting to Bruce Klinger, non-resident senior fellow at the Marine and Mike Mansfield Foundation in Washington. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you.
And also joining us is Chung Gu-yeon, associate professor of political science at Kangwon National University. Good to see you, Professor.
Thank you for having me today.
So let's start our discussion with Professor Chung. Pyongyang's most direct message, of course, Kim Yo-jong has now doubled down, saying there's nothing to discuss with the Lee Jae Myung administration. She also reaffirmed North Korea's nuclear status as irreversible and dismissed personal diplomacy as irrelevant to denuclearization as well. What does this sharper tone tell us about Pyongyang's plans on inter-Korean ties?
Well, I think the recent remark actually demonstrate and confirm the two-state doctrine that North Korea revealed in 2023. In other words, two Koreas are at war in a hostile relationship. And also that remark shows that North Korea prioritized dialogue with United States, not South Korea. But the thing is that North Korea tried to separating the personal relationship between Trump and Kim Jong-un from the official foreign policy of the United States toward North Korea. So I think that's the kind of things we have to notice, that they still have incentive to start the dialogue, but at the same time, they are not interested in prioritizing or put the denuclearization agenda on the table. So that's the kind of challenge for not only South Korea but also United States, that denuclearization will be a kind of long-term goal in realizing the relationship with North Korea.
Right, so a complex situation indeed. Now, following this, Seoul's presidential office said it takes note of Pyongyang's latest message, but will continue pushing for peace. Dr. Klinger, in your view, is Seoul showing strategic patience or leaving itself vulnerable by staying conciliatory?
In a way, it's both. Any South Korean government has to try to engage with North Korea in dialogue. Sometimes Pyongyang is willing to open the door. Other times it remains firmly locked. And we've even had times where U.S. diplomats literally tried to slide a letter from the U.S. government, including the U.S. president, under the door of the permanent North Korean mission in the UN, only to watch the letter be pushed back out into the hallway. So both Washington and Seoul have been trying to have dialogue with North Korea since October 2019, when some bilateral talks between Washington and Pyongyang collapsed. Since then, we've had virtually no contact. So both Washington and Seoul are going to try to continue dialogue attempts, but right now North Korea has shown that it really is not interested with either country. Because they're getting so many benefits with no or few conditions from Russia, far more benefits than they could get in dialogue with the United States.
Mm-hmm. So as part of, Seoul's attempts to, resume dialogue, Unification Minister Chung Dong-young has now said the government is open to proposing adjustments to the ROK-US joint exercises. Professor Chung, what do you think of the feasibility of this idea? And if they materialize, actually, do you think it could help thaw relations with Pyongyang?
Well, when it comes to feasibility, there's kind of two competing actually perspectives. Given that we have seen during the first Trump administration's suspension of Iraq-U.S. joint exercises has been used to facilitate dialogue with North Korea. So in that sense, United States, especially Donald Trump, might acknowledge the kind of instrument of this suspension of U.S. Joint exercises, but still it can be seen as a weakness. When you recall the first Trump administration, the suspension of U.S. joint exercises has been suggested in the middle of the negotiation, not as a precondition. Even if we suggest this kind of precondition, I don't think there will be a substantial kind of improvement when it comes to inter-Korean relationship. And even if that improvement in the inter-Korean relationship will not likely to lead to kind of denuclearization negotiations. And when you think about this suspension of joint exercises, it's one of the kind of hostile policies that North Korea criticized that United States poses to Korean Peninsula. So it is very important negotiation leverage. So considering all of this, I think suggesting this suspension as a precondition for dialogue is not wise. You have to think more about other kind of leverage to start the dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Now, regarding the same topic, President Donald Trump, meanwhile, said he's open to dialogue with Kim Jong-un, and he remains committed to the goals outlined in the 2018 Singapore summit. But, Professor, given the current climate and Kim Yo-jong's recent comments, do you think there's a realistic pathway back to U.S.-North Korea talks?
Well, I don't think Washington is misleading the moment right now, but stick to the original roadmap of denuclearizations and demonstrate the U.S. willingness, even if that is a Donald Trump administration, it shows that U.S. willingness to accomplish the goal of denuclearization. And also it means that the U.S. won't recognize North Korea as a nuclear state. But when it comes to realistic assessment, I think there will be many challenges, given that United States more focus on other kind of conflict, war in Ukraine and war in Middle East, and also Cambodia started just a war. So all of this kind of conflict has been distracting United States' attentions to the North Korea. So in that sense, Kim Yo-jong's remark shows that her willingness to talk with the United States. But when it comes to realistic assessment of back to U.S.-North Korea talk, not only about the possibility of denuclearizations, but United States has to finish up all of this other conflict as well as trade deals with allies and partners. So yes, it is realistic, but we have to think about other kind of preconditions to deal with in the first place.
Mm-hmm. So it seems Pyongyang is drawing a line between personal ties and actual diplomacy as well. Now let's shift gears a little bit to North Korea's ties with Russia. Moscow has launched its first direct commercial flight to Pyongyang, but beyond that, Ukrainian intelligence says North Korea has provided over 6.5 million artillery shells and hundreds of missile systems to Russia. Dr. Klinger, how does this change the nature of Moscow-Pyongyang relationship, and what kind of risks does this pose in the region?
Well, really, these military and economic instances really just affirm the trend we've seen in the Pyongyang-Moscow relationship over the past several years. What had seemed perhaps a fleeting transactional relationship now is becoming much more of a long-term strategic relationship, certainly as long as the Ukraine conflict continues. So North Korea has provided massive amounts of military assistance to North Korea, to Russia. And in return, we know it's getting sort of fuel and food and funding. And this enables North Korea to undermine the impact of international sanctions, which have been imposed on it, because it's getting so much economic assistance, trade assistance, or increased trade with Russia. And then, of course, there's the concern about what kind of military technology Russia is providing in North Korea. We have a lot of speculation as to what weapons or weapons design Russia may give, but we have very little real information. But any kind of improvement to North Korea's forces, and it may just be conventional forces, but even that is increasing the threat to South Korea, Japan, the United States. So it's a very great concern. So as long as the Ukraine conflict continues, as long as the North Korean-Russian relationship continues, Pyongyang will be less vulnerable to sanctions and less likely to want to come back to negotiations with the United States or South Korea.
Right. So the situation definitely changed over the past years since when Trump and Kim Jong-un had their talks before. Now, staying with the question, despite growing ties with Russia, North Korea still seems to lean heavily on China for trade. Dr. Klinger, do you think it's a vulnerability the U.S. and its allies can exploit, or has Pyongyang maintained to weaponize that dependency already?
We've been trying to use China as a leverage on North Korea for decades, and it's never worked. We've seen that China, even in the past when they were angry with North Korean actions and allowed incrementally stronger UN resolutions in the past, then Beijing would enforce those sanctions for a few months and then would turn a blind eye to the violations, including by Chinese banks and businesses. So right now, the relations that North Korea has with China and Russia are much stronger than they had in the past. And certainly the North Korean-Russian relations are garnering the most attention. But North Korean-China trade continues, and it's resumed to some levels of the pre-COVID levels. And China still is responsible for over 90% of North Korea's trade. So I believe Beijing is not necessarily happy with the growing North Korean-Russian relationship, but has been very quiet about it publicly. They have not criticized it, but they just hope that it doesn't lead North Korea to take even more provocative actions on the peninsula, which could then bring a crisis closer to China's borders.
Right. Then, Dr. Klinger, does this actually mean, like, North Korea is depending on China as well as Russia? So can we say that the economic situation between the two countries, inside the regime, has become better over the years?
Well, North Korea certainly feels that it is in a much stronger position than in 2018 and 2019 when it was engaging in negotiations. It's continued the trade with China, and then it's garnered this additional benefits, massive amounts of economic benefits from Russia. So it feels that it's in a stronger negotiating position if it ever comes back to negotiations, because we've seen Moscow and Beijing have been increasingly, willing to obstruct any kind of international response to North Korea's actions in the UN Security Council, even more so in the past. So diplomatically, North Korea is in a stronger position militarily from the Russian assistance, and then economically with the continued China trade and the economic benefits from Russia.
Definitely. Now, staying with that, North Korea's trade volume, in fact, in 2023 was the highest in 5 years, with China accounting for 98% of it. Professor Jung, what about your opinion? How does this economic rebound affect Pyongyang's leverage? Do you think it's giving the regime breathing room or deepening dependency?
Well, I think it's both asset and liability for North Korea, given that economic hardship, which has been frustrating like decades. So trade volume and increasing trade volumes and with dominant trade portion from China is instrumental in sustaining vulnerable economy, especially for North Korean people. But considering that, as Dr. Klinger mentioned, North Korea is hedging between China and Russia and try to create certain level of autonomy from both sides. Such dominant trade volume still demonstrate the structural dependency of North Korea to China, which means that even if North Korea tried to create a strategic alignment with Russia, there still remains structural economic dependency on China. And given that very narrow scope of trade network of North Korea, this dependency is less likely to change the foreseeable future. So in a sense, in the short term, it is a kind of breathing room, but at the same time, the long term, it is still remaining deepening dependency for North Korea.
All right, so we'll have to keep track on that. Meanwhile, as for South Korea, Seoul is facing its own military challenge. A defense study says South Korea needs 500,000 troops to deter a North Korean first strike, but demographics could drop that to under 300,000 by 2014. Dr. Klinger, how much should we be concerned about this?
Should be very concerned. Back in the early 2000s, there were studies demographic studies that showed that South Korea would no longer be able to maintain a military force of 625,000 troops, and that it would be going down to 500,000 by about this time. And those demographic studies proved to be correct. And that initiated a series of defense reform plans in South Korea by successive administrations, where Seoul would try to replace the quantity of South Korean troops with quality of weapon systems. And those defense reform plans often were underfunded, and it lowered the deterrent capabilities of the alliance. In recent years, South Korea has been devoting a large amount of its GDP towards defense, so the capabilities are certainly getting better. However, the demographic trends continue. With Seoul's very low birth rate, I believe the lowest in the world, will have fewer and fewer 18-year-olds available for conscription. That raises questions as to how will South Korea maintain a force, continue to replace quantity with quality, but also politicians from both parties have decreased the length of conscription in order to, win over South Korean youth voters. And that's something that may have to be reconsidered, is no longer have shorter conscription times, but increase them in order to fill the ranks, as well as have improved wages for troops in order to perhaps offset conscription with a larger voluntary force.
Right. The nation's demographic situation has been a long laying problem in the country, but there are still efforts to tackle that. But in other ways, Seoul is also boosting efforts in just deploying its upgraded Cheongung-2 missile defense system. Dr. Klinger, what significance does this carry from your perspective? How much does this shift deterrence? How much does this shift the deterrence equation, excuse me?
Well, South Korea in recent years has really done an impressive improvement to its military. When I talk to U.S. alliance managers over the years, there are far fewer complaints and far greater kudos given by the U.S. to South Korea for its military procurement, its military training, et cetera. So the improvement to the South Korean missile defenses goes along with improvements to its offensive forces as well, and sort of across the board on conventional forces. So all of that is to the good because it enhances allied deterrence capability. It also is working towards some of the conditions for OPCON transition, though South Korea still has a lot more work to do to fulfill the agreed upon conditions. So certainly North Korea's growing missile inventory poses a greater risk to South Korea as well as Japan and the United States. So any improvements in missile defenses is very, very good. That said, North Korea is probably building more offensive missiles quicker than South Korea and the U.S. are building and deploying missile defenses.
Mm-hmm. So it's not really just about defense, it's actually signaling capability as well. Now, finally, before we let you go, with Pyongyang tightening its axis with Russia, hedging on China, and also closing the door on Seoul, Professor Chung, do you see North Korea building a new long-term strategic alignment?
Well, I think there are several factors in determining the prospect of North Korea's new strategic alignment. Considering the ROK-US alliances and ROK-US-Japan Trilateral cooperation, North Korea would like to balance against those alignments and alliances by starting cooperation with Russia. But China and Russia has another kind of issue, not just with North Korea, but also with the United States. And also, United States would think a rapprochement with Russia will influence the U.S.-North Korea relations, which means that how and when the U.S. and Ukraine war and come up with these peace deals will impact North Korea's attempt to strategic alignment. And likewise, Trump administration would think how U.S.-China strategic competition unfold will affect North Korea-U.S. relationship as well. So yes, in the short term, North Korea would like to build a strategic alignment, but in the meantime, the calculation of China, Russia, and also United States, this great power politics and how they end their war in Ukraine and strategic competition with China will influence the process.
Right. So if this is the path that Pyongyang's actually heading, the real question will be how the world and other countries would choose to respond to that. We'll be watching closely on that. But as for now, we'll have to leave our discussion here at this point. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights tonight, Professor Chung.
Thank you.
And Dr. Klinger, we appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.